Hello everyone and welcome to Grimoire of Myths. Today we will talk about the life and philosophy of Soren Kierkegaard. But first, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Now, let's begin. Soren Kierkegaard was a Danish theologian, philosopher, poet, social critic and religious author who is widely considered to be the first existentialist philosopher. He wrote critical texts on organized religion, Christianity, morality, ethics, psychology, and the philosophy of religion, displaying a fondness for metaphor, irony, and parables. Much of his philosophical work deals with the issues of how one lives as a single individual, giving priority to concrete human reality over abstract thinking and highlighting the importance of personal choice and commitment. He was against literary critics who denied idealist intellectuals and philosophers of his me and thought that other thinkers such as Swedenborg, Hegel and Fichte were all understood far too quickly by scholars. Kierkegaard's theological work focuses on Christian ethics, the institution of the Church, the differences between purely objective proofs of Christianity, the innate qualitative discern between man and God, and the individual's subjective relationship to the God-man Jesus Christ, which came through faith. Much of his work deals with Christian love. He was extremely critical of the doctrine and practice of Christianity as a state-controlled religion. His psychological work explored the emotions and feelings of individuals when faced with life choices. Opposite Jean-Paul Sartre and the atheistic existential paradigm, Kierkegaard focused on Christian existentialism. Kierkegaard's early work was written using pseudonyms to present distinctive viewpoints interacting in complex dialogue. He explored particularly complex problems from different viewpoints, each under a different pseudonym. He wrote upbuilding discourses under his own name and dedicated them to the single individual who might want to discover the meaning of his works. He wrote, "Science and scholarship want to teach that becoming objective is the way. Christianity teaches that the way is to become subjective, to become a subject." While scientists learn about the world by observation, Kierkegaard emphatically denied that observation alone could reveal the inner workings of the world of the spirit. Some of Kierkegaard's key ideas include the concept of subjective and objective truths, the night of faith, the recollection and repetition dichotomy, angst, the infinite qualitative distinction, faith as a passion, and the three stages on life's way. Kierkegaard wrote in Danish, and the reception of his work was initially limited to Scandinavia, but by the turn of the 20th century, his writings were translated into French, German, and other major European languages. By the mid-20th century, his thought exerted a substantial influence on philosophy, theology, and Western culture in general. Kierkegaard was born to an affluent family in Copenhagen. His mother, Anne Sørensdatter Lund Kierkegaard, had served as a maid in the household before marrying his father, Michael Pedersen Kierkegaard. She was an unassuming figure, quiet and not formally educated. They had 7 children. Her granddaughter, Henrietta Lund, wrote that she wielded the scepter with joy and protected Søren and Peter like a hen, protecting her chicks. She also wielded influence on her children, so that later Peter said that his brother preserved many of their mother's words in his writings. His father, on the other hand, was a well-to-do wool merchant from Jutland. He was a very stern man, to all appearances dry and prosaic, but under his rustic cloak demeanor, he concealed an active imagination which not even his great age could blunt. He was also interested in philosophy and often hosted intellectuals at his home. He was devoted to the rationalist philosophy of Christian Wolff, and he eventually retired partly to pursue more of Wolff's writings. Kierkegaard, who followed his father's beliefs as a child, was heavily influenced by Michael's devotion to Wolffian rationalism. He also enjoyed the comedies of Ludwig Holberg and the writings of Johann Georg Hamann, Gotthold Ephraim Lessing, Edward Young, and Plato. The figure of Socrates, whom Kierkegaard encountered in Plato's dialogues, would prove to be a phenomenal influence on the philosopher's later interest in irony, as well as his frequent deployment of indirect communication. Kierkegaard loved to walk along the crooked streets of 19th century Copenhagen, where carriages rarely went. In 1848, Kierkegaard wrote, "I had real Christian satisfaction in the thought that, if there were no other, there was definitely one man in Copenhagen whom every poor person could freely accost and converse with on the street. That if there were no other, there was one man who, whatever the society he most commonly frequented, did not shun contact with the poor, but greeted every maidservant he was acquainted with, every manservant, every common labourer. Our Lady's Church was at one end of the city, where Bishop Minster preached the gospel. At the other end was the Royal Theatre, where Fru Heiberg performed. Kierkegaard wrote his concluding unscientific postscript to Philosophical Fragments in 1846, and here he tried to explain the intent of the first part of his authorship. He said, "Christianity will not be content to be an evolution within the total category of human nature. An engagement such as that is too little to offer to a God. Neither does it even want to be the paradox for the believer, and then surreptitiously, little by little, provide him with understanding, because the martyrdom of faith to crucify one's understanding is not a martyrdom of the moment, but the martyrdom of continuance." The second part of his authorship was summed up in practice in Christianity. The deification of the established order is the secularization of everything. With regard to secular matters, the established order may be entirely right. One should join the established order, be satisfied with that relativity, etc. But ultimately, the relationship with God is also secularized. We want it to coincide with certain relativity, do not want it to be something essentially different from our positions in life, rather than that it shall be absolute for every individual human being, and this, the individual person's God relationship, shall be precisely what keeps every established order in suspense, and that God, at any moment he chooses, if he merely presses upon an individual in his relationship with God, promptly has a witness, an informer, a spy, or whatever you want to call it, one who in unconditional obedience and with unconditional obedience, by being persecuted, by suffering, by dying, keeps the established order in suspense. Later scholars, such as the post-structuralists, interpreted Kierkegaard's work by attributing the pseudonymous texts to respective authors. Postmodern Christians present a different interpretation of Kierkegaard's works. Kierkegaard used the category of the individual to stop the endless either-or. Kierkegaard has been called a philosopher, a theologian, the father of existentialism, both atheistic and theistic variations, a literary critic, a social theorist, a humorist, a psychologist, and a poet. Two of his influential ideas are subjectivity and the notion popularly referred to as leap of faith. However, the Danish equivalent to the English phrase leap of faith does not appear in the original Danish, nor is the English phrase found in current English translations of Kierkegaard's works. Kierkegaard does mention the concepts of faith and leap together many times in his works. The leap of faith is his conception of how an individual would believe in God or how a person would act in love. Faith is not a decision based on evidence that, say, certain beliefs about God are true or that a certain person is worthy of love. No such evidence could ever be enough to completely justify the kind of total commitment involved in true religious faith or romantic love. Faith involves making that commitment anyway. Kierkegaard thought that to have faith is at the same time to have doubt. So, for example, for one to truly have faith in God, one would also have to doubt one's beliefs about God. The doubt is the rational part of a person's thought, involved in weighing evidence, without which the faith would have no real substance. Someone who does not realize that Christian doctrine is inherently doubtful and that there can be no objective certainty about its truth does not have faith but is merely credulous. For example, it takes no faith to believe that a pencil or a table exists when one is looking at it and touching it. In the same way, to believe or have faith in God is to know that one has no perceptual or any other access to God, and yet still has faith in God. Kierkegaard writes, "Doubt is conquered by faith, just as it is faith which has brought doubt into the world." Kierkegaard also stresses the importance of the self and the self's relation to the world as being grounded in self-reflection and introspection. He argued in concluding unscientific postscript to Philosophical Fragments that subjectivity is truth and truth is subjectivity. This has to do with the distinction between what is objectively true and an individual's subjective relation, such as indifference or commitment, to that truth. People who in some sense believe the same things may relate to those beliefs quite differently. Two individuals may both believe that many of those around them are poor and deserve help, but this knowledge may lead only one of them to decide to actually help the poor. This is how Kierkegaard put it. Kierkegaard primarily discusses subjectivity concerning religious matters. As already noted, he argues that doubt is an element of faith and that it is impossible to gain any objective certainty about religious doctrines, such as the existence of God or the life of Christ. The most one could hope for would be the conclusion that the Christian doctrines are probably true, but if a person were to believe such doctrines only to the degree they seemed likely to be true, he or she would not be genuinely religious at all. Faith consists in a subjective relation of absolute commitment to these doctrines. For Kierkegaard, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, which arises when we realize the vast possibilities before us. Despair, on the other hand, is a sickness of the spirit resulting from not living in accordance with our true self. Kierkegaard's writings were largely ignored during his lifetime, but his ideas gained recognition posthumously. Today, he is celebrated for his profound insights into human psychology, faith, and the complexities of existence. His influence extends beyond philosophy into theology, psychology, and literature. Kierkegaard's thoughts challenge us to confront our existence, make authentic choices, and take a leap of faith in our own lives. Søren Kierkegaard's exploration of life's deepest questions remains as relevant today as it was in the 19th century. His call to live authentically and embrace the uncertainty of existence is a powerful message for all of us. So next time you face a tough choice or a moment of doubt, remember Kierkegaard and his leap of faith. Thanks for watching, and remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more deep dives into the lives of great philosophers. See you next time.